Welcome to What the Heck's, your source for Warhammer Underworlds and under 30 new bits of content to consume. Today I'm your co-host Phil, and with me as always is your other co-host, Davy. How you doing?
Good. A little lost in the maze right now.
Yeah, I believe it. There's just so much nether maze between the new box, reboxing, and a new warband.
Yeah,
We just have...
Yeah, it's funny because Exiled Dead are gonna kind of in everybody's head be rolled in with Nether Maze just on the weird way they got released, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's like they didn't make it into their actual quote unquote season.
Yeah.
If you want to consider Nether Maze a new season now, which we'll kind of see what happens with that.
Yeah.
We know at this point we are not going to be rotating Dire Chasm yet.
Mm-hmm.
So whether this actually counts as its own season is sort of up in the air, but it is a new core box, so theoretically it is.
Yeah.
And some online rumblings have said that, like, yes, this was like classified as a new season,
Yeah,
or whatever.
To some degree, it's all semantics, right? So,
yeah, right. Yeah. How do you want to talk about a game? You can divide it up however you want. Yeah. But yeah, so we're coming at you shortly after pre-orders go up for all of this new stuff. There's tons of new content out there, including ours. If you want to go check out any of those, there's so much right now. I've listened to and read a few things here and there just to make sure that I'm not way off base on some of my opinions on things. But yeah, so go check that out. Today, we are continuing our coverage of the Nether Maze box. If you haven't listened to it already, we recorded a quick take on just sort of the general contents of the box for the two new warbands and the boards and rules updates. We did not cover yet the universals, though. So today, we are going to do that. The sort of truly universal card deck as it's described in the box, and then also the Grand Alliance card deck, because those are also universals. They're just slightly more restricted.
Mm-hmm. And even beyond the box, we'll hit, as we already said, lumped Exiled Dead. Exiled Dead are the addenda to Nether Maze here. So
correct, getting kind of just slapped in there. But yeah, so we're, since this is coming out so close together and there's so much to cover, we're just going to kind of dive in, no pun intended, and pretty much just get right into the main topic. So we're going to try and talk today less of a like blow by blow, here's each card and what we think of each one, because that's pretty much what everybody does and how they write about these. And if that's what you want, it's out there in spades. You can find it and read it and get reviews of every single card. We're just going to try and cover some interesting themes that we seem to see here, and maybe some things that we can expect to see going forward.
Yeah, when we were talking about how we might want to cover this, I was trying to think about like what would our take be, and what advantages can we bring? We as some of the favored few who have received a copy early and been able to kind of mull it over for a while. We kind of decided like let's talk about the sort of the themes that we've seen, and like what are some of the things, and which of those themes do we think will be impactful, and which do we think are maybe kind of side dressing sort of thing. So
yeah,
it like you were saying earlier, or like we were saying, it's all semantics. So you may choose to group these cards in a different way. You may see some patterns there that we've overlooked or not agree with the patterns we've seen. And if it's the case, then let us know. But some of these I think are generally agreed a quote unquote big deal. And I think we'll probably start with one of those.
Yeah. So the sort of thing that's got a lot of people buzzing right now in the objectives is we've got these new hold objectives. But what's what's sort of different about these, Davy?
So these are surges, which is the important piece of what we're talking about. And this is,
Indeed.
if you want to bring up your deck builder of choice and take a look, sudden revelation, ever downwards, shadow elimination. These are all some variation of uh, score after a power step. They're all one glory. Score after a power step if your warband flipped some number of featured tokens. They may have some different caveat. Sudden revelation, I think, is the one you're going to see all over the place, and that is specifically
Yeah.
after a power step if your warband flip 2 or more feature tokens. And that one basically is hidden purpose, right? You can do it by being on 2 feature tokens and delving both of them. um,
Yeah.
so hidden purpose we saw all over the place. It was restricted for a long time. Ever downwards has 2 caveats. It's a delve 3 or leader delves in enemy territory and is now on an objective. And then shadow elimination is just one half of that. Flip 1 in enemy territory and it's held by a leader. So the the easiest thing to say is this is just hidden purpose again, and
Hmm.
it's generally true. However, what's interesting is that more war bands are fighting over the tokens now, right? Like
Yep.
we see people care about them because they're objectives, or care about them because they're feature tokens, or care about them because they are cover hexes. So there's theoretically even more competition for those. You have incentive to be on them, even if you don't score off them. Although pretty much everybody's going to be scoring off them in some way with this sudden revelation. Um, and the other thing I think is important is that this is oh so slightly slower than hidden purpose, because hidden purpose would score after an activation. Uh,
Yeah.
this scoring after a power step means that the glory you get from it can't be used to affect the next activation. So if you do it in
Indeed.
your power step, you cannot apply a defensive upgrade to protect yourself during your opponent's activation. Conversely, doing it in your opponent's power step, you can't put on an offensive upgrade that they are not able to react to. So just that little bit slower. It'll be interesting to see how big a difference that makes. But I don't think it's insignificant.
Yeah. And I think that while it's not necessarily guaranteed that this gives you the opportunity to react, there is, I think, more opportunity than there was for something like hidden purpose.
Mm-hmm.
In that, if you have a distraction of some kind and you see somebody set up and they're like on 2 and it's in the middle of a round and for some reason they just start delving and you're like, well, if you're not Starblood, you have no reason to be doing that right now. So I'm going to guess
Yeah,
that you're trying to score,
sure.
and then that should be able to cue you in to be like, now is a good time to push somebody of that feature token.
Mm-hmm.
um Still very hard to stop though.
Yeah.
And pushing back on is very easy. uh yeah, like super generic, super simple. um I guess one thing that's interesting with these two is that the beast restriction, is what I'll call it, since that's sort of the new term as of Harrow Deep, doesn't restrict this in any way. Like, they keep sort of adding these restrictions to warbands to be like, these fighters can't hold objectives, to try and make it harder to score.
Mm-hmm.
But then they just took away all the score for holding objectives and put in feature tokens, which don't require holding at all.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. I don't know if that will also make a difference. It kind of feels like it will. What do you think?
You talking about the beast aspect here?
Yeah, yeah. So the fact that like the warband restrictions for holding don't slow these down in any way.
Yeah. So they don't slow down the surges. I think that's more of a big deal in the end phase where there, and we'll see a little bit. There are objectives that care about holding, or there are objective cards that care about holding objectives.
Yeah.
So if you are running a bunch of beasts, you are more limited in what you can partake in there. So I think that's maybe where the differentiation comes from. My overall take on this is a tentative plus. Like, there were so many surge objectives that were oriented around some kind of kill or some kind of offensive thing. And I think the presence of this, even though any kind of warband is going to be interested in it, I think it gives some options for warbands that might be attempting to, stay in their territory or something like that, and there's some cost associated with it too, minimal, but like when you flip your feature token into a non-cover, like that, there's going to be
Mhm.
some timing to figure out of how to do this and make sure that the hex is in the face that you want it, like, and I was thinking of this specifically from the perspective of the Shadeborn, who are trying to get on these feature tokens. So this is attracted to them for that reason, because they're already going to try and be on there. But if you flip it into an objective, well, now it's not providing the defensive bonus you need. So theoretically, say, okay, well, then I want to try to do it in my opponent's power step so that I can flip it back and have it defensively. But also, you're interested in having it in a particular, if you flip it into an objective, you're signaling to your opponent, like, I'm not going to use the shadow ambush ability.
Yep.
So I think there's going to be some timing things. Some warbands worrying a lot more about it than others.
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, I think like if you're playing Hrothgorn, for instance, you probably don't really care. Flipping is something you were already doing passively, and you're just like, I don't know, I'm just going to do something to get somebody on here to be able to delve, and I'll
yeah,
score some more passive glory. But if you're playing like Skaven and you need that defensive boost, maybe you don't want to just throw people on willy nilly and just flip.
yeah.
But yeah, get ready to see it, folks, because it's coming.
Yeah. I mean, my main hope is that it increases the range of possible strategies available. That I don't know that it's enough. I was talking with Benny a little bit, who appears to be dabbling a little bit with the game, and he's still of the opinion that these horde warbands bleed too much glory, and their ceiling is not high enough to keep up. But something, some of these are perhaps more easily available or easily scoreable by them, so they might be able to get started faster than they would otherwise. So.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it does feel like, from what we saw at Adepticon, like this probably slots right into the Crimson Court, and they're perfectly happy to just stand on two and flip.
Yeah, I would have liked it in Miari's.
Yeah, right. But I mean, conversely, Thorns and Sepulchral Guard, like this is basically just take one action, score a glory. It's pretty straightforward. So
yeah, for sure,
should be cool. I would like to see more of these. I think having more that are maybe more complex, but then also have more reward would also be cool to see. I think when you make them as simple as Sudden Revelation, it's kind of just like, oh, this is a no-brainer. It's something I'm doing anyway. It's super easy. I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
You start upping the reward, but making you have to work more for it. I mean, like Ever Downwards is actually fairly difficult. That's just for one?
Just for one, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of where you start to see this weird balance where it's like, I don't know if I would take Ever Downwards all the time because it's a lot of work, or you're putting your leader at risk. But you start to, that's the space I'd like this to end up in, where it's like, hey, if you've got a strategy that can work really well for holding these things, you can like make a lot of glory off of it, even if you have to work for it. And that opens up like a whole nother avenue for the game, which is always what we like to see.
Yeah.
We don't want to have a whole bunch of samey decks. Like, it's boring.
Right. Totally.
So talking a little bit with Ever Downward, we have this other group of sort of general objectives that we're kind of seeing where they seem to we saw a lot of these aggressive cards in Harrow Deep originally that are just saying like, get in enemy territory, sort of just wholesale. It's like, push everybody in, we're gonna go fight, it's gonna be cool. Not always cool. This set of cards seems to continue that, but specifically putting your leader at risk.
Mm.
And so Ever Downwards kind of has this where the sort of secondary condition is the leader delving in enemy territory on an objective.
Yeah.
You want to just run down what all these other ones are? There's a few of them.
Yeah, I found a few objectives that kind of deal with that. So there is living on the edge, which is asking you to have a leader who is vulnerable in enemy territory, which really is living on the edge, right? That one is particularly dangerous,
Yeah.
in my opinion. It does score 2 glory, which is attractive, but man, scary, especially since it's an end phase and you don't know how it's going to wrap around on the other side.
Yeah.
There's one where you have done even farther, where a lost leader, and this is 2 glory if your leader is out of action, but you have more glory than the enemy, which is really funny. I mean, it's got an awesome quote on it too.
Yeah.
For 2 glory, but these are the kind of cards where I'm like, what, is there a build where I just want to, like, what leaders don't I care about? Like, is it Starbag? Like, who, is it, would I just bomb, play Godsworn Hunt?
Edra, go do work.
Yeah, Edra's gonna die. I can about guarantee that. You might as well get something for it. But the problem is, like, you got to be ahead of things with her. I tagged Confident Conjurer, or Courageous Conjurer, I should say. And this is where you cast a spell close to people, or you cast a spell while vulnerable. And since so many warbands, the only caster is the leader. I kind of put that in there, like in both those things that you're in the mix. And then perhaps the most nifty is the Into the Fray, and this is a destruction only one. And this one, you need your leader has to be on an objective in enemy territory, which means they're in enemy territory. They've gotten rid of their cover bonus, and they also have to be within 2x's of 1 or more enemy fighters. That's relatively reasonable, and you can think of some leaders in destruction that would really enjoy that. Mollog being one.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Old Mollog.
But also, like, Ripa likes this. I think even Morgok probably not too opposed. So
I think it kind of just happens incidentally, really.
Yeah. So I don't think, I don't think that this is overall a theme, except for maybe destruction. Like, maybe there's a destruction thing where you're like, all right, I'm leaning into some of this, put my leader at risk stuff, and almost entirely because that Into the Fray is I think it's a pretty strong, 2 glory end phase.
Yeah.
That,
I think if you're running Unafraid, you're kind of already doing half of this anyway.
Yeah.
So I think it would make sense. And so, like, Crushes, I think, would really like combining those two. Like, that feels pretty solid for end phases. They both score for 2.
I'm gonna give a side note to the art for Into the Fray. It's got Mollog is looking at an objective, and there's 2 from the Claw Pack who are like creeping up on him, and I just like thinking that they're like, "Dude, is this? Are we doing this? Like, is this like, you first though? That's cool, right?"
On that objective, there is a book.
Yeah. Oh yeah, a little callback,
little nod to tomes there.
Little tomes Mollog.
Well, some, depending on your side of the table, either some very good times or some very bad times.
Right. So as a overall, I don't know that this one's all that impactful in the way that the delve surges are going to be prevalent and shape the meta. But it was just an interesting sort of mini theme that we noticed.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't even have to be impactful for it to continue to push a trend. I mean, it's like, I think, can assume that we are going to continue to see things that reward you for being in enemy territory, because they seem to want the game to drive towards being combat oriented. Even if your main scoring isn't driven by kills, they still don't want to have the whole strategy for non-aggro players to be sit back in the corner and hopefully not die. And so I just have to think that like they keep adding this sort of stuff to be like something's going to stick here, and then once we know what it is that like gets people enticed into taking this stuff, we're going to do more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it feels like until Harrow Deep, we didn't have a lot of this like push enemy territory stuff. Obviously, we had things like Conquest, but that's
Yeah,
different.
like old deeds or the
Yeah, like
Rippas,
have your whole
Wisdom
enemy.
stuff, but Cruel Hunters. But it wasn't at this critical mass where multiple warbands were trying to do it by and large.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which I mean, I think we can pretty safely say that the invasion aggro meta is prevalent and being used in a lot of different warbands in a lot of different ways, which I think shows that it is both good and like a high percentage of the usable cards right now.
Yeah.
All right. So that's sort of our objective themes that we saw, or at least I didn't see any specific themes outside of that. Is there anything else that you noticed?
Not overall. I think there are a few things that we're talking about holding in the end phase, like a couple more possibilities there, which bulk that out, but not enough necessarily to call it a theme per se.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair. I do think we're seeing a little bit more leaning into some of the like keyworded scoring things. We've got some like feeding fear, references domains. We've got maps, which
Mm.
we don't have very many maps yet.
Well,
But
we have one, but let's talk about that real quick. So,
yeah.
maps, we have two cards that reference it, right? We have the Detailed Map Fragment.
Yep.
And this has two things on it. One, when it's on, you could use an action, and help me out because I don't have it in front of me, but use an action, you
Mm-hmm.
get a spent glory, and then your opponent can put an upgrade out for free.
Yep.
Or if you've collected up 4 map fragments as a reaction, you can dump them all and get 2 unspent glory.
Yep.
And that balance is pretty interesting. The action is just really expensive on the first, right? Like that.
It is.
But late in the game, you getting spent glory versus your opponent, like that's a late game helpful thing, right? Because
Yeah.
you can do that, and your opponent late in the game often has more unspent glory than they can use. Like once you're in the double digits of glory, you theoretically can't spend much more, because you usually only have 10 upgrades in your deck. That on its own, like those at first glance, and we don't know if the other map fragments will look similar or be identical or have different, in the past, it's been different things like in relics and tomes and lost pages. Each one has a different effect. So that's what I presume will happen. But something like Lucky Find is an end phase. Does somebody have a map? Cool, get 1 glory. Not super powerful, but it capitalizes on that potentially passive build. So it's something to keep an eye on in my mind.
It's certainly interesting. I did some thinking about the Detailed Map Fragment because I initially looked at it and was like, okay, this is nothing. You're not going to want to do this. That's too much. But it's effectively a key that you can cash in when you need to.
Mm-hmm.
And people used to run keys quite a bit.
That's a good way to think about it.
The 1 glory sort of makes a bigger difference than you'd think. Although, you have to be careful. The giving out the upgrade thing is certainly could end up biting you. But it was like, oh, okay. Well, when I started thinking about it that way, I just need to make sure that I time this right, and it's just like 1 free glory.
Yeah,
that's pretty solid. I actually was wondering if the 4 fragments cashed in is ever worth it. You're getting 2, but you had to take so much time to actually stack them all up on 1 fighter.
Yeah, I think it's a time of the game and how much action you have available for you, right? Because if I think that what I like is that it gives you an option like, oh man, my card draw was such that my first 3 or 4 objectives were maps. Okay, I've got them stacked up. it's still early in the game. Ditching these now gets me more unspent glory, which let me put out some of my other stuff,
Yeah.
which is important now, and it doesn't come at an action cost. Whereas the other option is a late game option, where maybe we're all kind of wiped out. I've got one fighter, you've got one fighter, and like there's going to be, I can make one charge, and so maybe I can like stand there and read 3 maps and then charge or something.
Yeah.
So I like that it has kind of 2 conditions where it's helpful. And I think having the objective means that there's more ways to score. We've kind of seen one or the other, like an objective, sets that you collect and then score using an objective, or sets that you collect and score using something that's on them.
Hmm.
Not all that often. Something Not all that often both. Although Tomes had a little bit of both. So
Yeah. And I mean, tomes ended up being a bit problematic, but
sure,
I think,
very very restricted.
yeah, it slowly over time, but eventually we got there, and it was like, yeah, you basically, if you're gonna, this is too much.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, I always like the like, here's this cool set of magical things, and you just, if you can stack them all at once on one fighter, you get this really cool bonus. Like, I like that thematically. I feel like it's been hard to execute, but I'm glad they're taking another shot at it.
Sure, totally. Yeah, it's fun, and
Yeah.
I think they're bracketing it in. Certainly, there were some silent relics that were much more taken than others, but I don't think we'd argue that silent relics were broken.
No, no, not
And
at all.
as of this recording, none of them are restricted. So
I think they did a very good job.
yeah,
Silent relics, I think, like having the bonuses tied to multiple pieces meant that you couldn't just play them out and have them be super powerful. And then there wasn't some like crazy score 5 for having all of them equipped or something
yeah,
weird that would skew the game. So
yeah.
they worked out very well. And I did just check because I was curious and I couldn't remember. The map from Black Powder does not have the map keyword, unfortunately. So
Oh man,
uh,
yeah,
I had sort of thought maybe, but no. And then there is the waterlogged map as well, which is it's like a key. You score it in the third end phase, but only if you're in enemy territory. But that one is also not keyworded as a map. So
yeah. Why would it be?
so just because they're called maps doesn't mean that they work with this stuff. So it'll only
Good
be
cut.
these new ones coming forward.
Yeah. Oh, hey, one more thought about this. Clearly, there must be at least 4, right? Because there is a
Yeah,
caveat for
must be.
having 4. If you can imagine that there's going to be the same number of war bands, like in
Mm-hmm.
this being a half season, we've already seen 2 of them. That means we only got 2 more. We've only seen 1 so far. That would account for 3. They usually don't double them, usually. And so maybe you could guess that there will be a pack, another rivals pack dropping to find that 4th.
That would be cool.
So I don't know if that's a little too reading the tea leaves sort of thing, but it's possible.
Yeah, we shall see.
Yeah.
But something cool to look forward to.
Yeah.
Something else that might be cool to look forward to is it appears, although this is early days, but it appears that they are adding in some more support for wizards again.
Yeah. I think I counted up between these 2 sets, the Exiled Dead and Nether Maze, there are 6 new gambits. 1 each is locked behind Chaos and Destruction Grand Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
But all those 6, each of them are a one symbol cast. Either just need 1 channel or 1 focus, which is good. Basically, I mean, by and large, I don't think you ever see double channel or double focus. Certainly not double focus. Every once in a while, you see somebody will try to take a double channel. Unless we haven't seen innates be really part of the mix for quite a while. So right off the bat, that makes these more playable, and I think the effects on all of them are relatively good. Like they're certainly in the realm of like, okay, I would consider these for inclusion in a deck. And anytime that happens, it's worth taking a look at. So it'd be Abyssos's Eruption, which is a pseudo. It is a ping. It's got some restrictions on it where it's a focus for damaging each fighter on a feature token that is not in enemy territory. So everyone in neutral and yours. Yara's summon is like a drag. It can pull towards you a friendly or an enemy fighter that's within 3. Murky Oblivion. This is actually really good. Focus, if cast, each attack action has -1 dice if the target is in a cover hex. That's a universal thing.
It
So
persists.
you're gonna hit yourself with it as well, but it persists until the end of the round. So
It's
um,
pretty crazy.
yeah, Quintox Bubble is just for a channel. You can reduce damage on a fighter that you've picked, and that fighter will also fly. That one also persists until the fighter's dealt damage, um, and then Spiteful Channeling and Shadow Jaws are the ones that are behind Grand Alliances, but those are various flavors of ping. So I think we were talking about this, like the extra gambit spells is handy. There's some upgrades out there that affect casting. There's a domain. I'm sorry, maybe it's not a domain. Vaults Mysterium, is that a domain?
Is it? I don't remember.
Oh, it's a waypoint. There's Vaults Mysterium, which
Mm.
is a waypoint, and that would be the third waypoint we've seen, and that is a crazy one where +1 wizard level, and any crit means you backlash, and backlash does even more damage. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's kind of a splash, and enough for anyone who's interested in those caster decks.
Mhm.
Which, hello eyes, hello uh,
Curse
storm
breakers.
tires, curse breakers. Yeah, uh, that'll always get them looking. The big thing was that there wasn't really much objective wise that added in there.
Yeah.
I think Zinch gets a little bit with Arcane Scheme, which is something about having gambit spells in their
Yeah.
graveyard.
Well,
So
so it's a hybrid.
yeah.
You're either 3 or more gambit spells in your power discard pile, so it's just like, hey, if this is late enough in the game, you just score this. Or if you have a Zinch wizard holding an objective.
hmm Which I actually like that design a lot, because early on, it's another, like we were talking about, an early effect or a late effect.
Yep.
Early on, you can usually afford to do some positioning where, like, let me give Vortimus onto an objective. That's helpful. And then late, you have more demands on your positioning, and you don't want to be as restricted. But late, you're much more likely to have thrown 3 gambit spells out. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's solid. The fact that it pretty much only plays in eyes is not a good thing for how much use the card will get, but
it's a good thing
you
for
know,
eyes.
it's good for eyes. Yeah,
Yeah.
eyes need all the help they can get. I mean, I guess if we could get into a world where the only way you could play really effective Magic was if the Zinch warband did it, I would not be upset about that in any way.
Mm.
Um, I mean, it's thematic,
Yeah.
and it's like they are not powerful for anything else. Like they've got some tricks, but on the whole, they're a warband that was designed with a fairly low power level. So, if they got a thing that nobody else could do, I think that would actually be pretty healthy. Um, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But I mean, overall, we haven't seen Magic really in the last, what, 2 seasons? Dire Chasm and Harrow Deep,
Yeah, just a
basically.
couple corner cases. Hunting Bolt was
Yeah.
nice for when quarries were around, and
Yeah.
you know, uh, Chameleon Skinks were 3 dice on guard. Like, well, okay, I'll just smoke you with this. But it
Right.
was pretty corner case. So it'd be interesting to see if there's enough of these are good enough to start seeing some play again. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Um, I guess the thing to watch out for that I always forget about is that the Death Warbands now have 2 very effective wizards in the Crimson Court and in Kanan. Kanan's only level 1, but man, he is one heck of a wizard in terms of just staying power. So, like,
Yeah.
uh, I don't know that you play like all out spells in Death, but it certainly could happen. Be interesting to see. I'd want someone to try it. I don't think I want to be that person, but if somebody
Yeah.
else has tried it, let me know.
Well, I mean, just having the wizard keyword can sometimes unlock stuff for you. Like there was
Oh
a
yeah,
Lost
yeah,
Pages Kanan build, which only existed because Kanan was a wizard, and he might not even cast all that much. It's just that he knew how to hold a book that had spells in it, and that made
yeah,
him able to attempt that build.
yeah, yeah. So lots of new potential avenues. We'll see what happens.
Mm.
But for now, I think we can leave that there. If you've got any other, if anybody else has any thoughts on magic and casters, and if anybody has a cool casting build, let us know, because that is something that I haven't seen in a while and would like to see more of.
Yeah. I even just doing this I thought there was enough here that I was like, I think I want to go take another look at eyes. I converted up
Yeah,
that warband just in time to kind of stop playing them for a while. So it'd be nice to
yeah,
play
get
with
them
my
out.
conversions. So,
I would like to see them.
yeah.
So try that. Uh, Sort of the last of these. Um, I guess we could lump these all together as sort of like new or continued patterns in objectives. We have some more hold end phase cards.
Hmm.
Some of them being pretty solid, or at least notable in the sense that like they're not just immediately going to be ignored. Um, you want to run through what those are quick?
Uh, so just a handful, and these kind of I flagged them more because they kind of continued some existing themes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's extraordinary revelation, which which man, Vortimus is really feeling it on
Yeah.
this one. His eye is bleeding theoretically. I don't know what's happening there. Doesn't
Yeah,
look
I don't
great.
know.
Doesn't look healthy.
It's like shadowy goop stuff, I think,
Yeah.
because it's all black.
Um,
But either way,
but three glory, so heads up. Scored in an end phase of two or more friendly fighters are each holding an objective in enemy territory. That's a big score. And this is more
it is.
invading, but it's invading hold. Uh, getting on
Isn't
stuff and holding it.
isn't there already one like what is it?
Treasure hunters, yeah,
Treasure hunters.
yeah. So you can lean into that, and then of course there is making a statement, which is hold all.
Yep. Yeah.
So if you have a way to get into enemy territory and really camp there, like I'm sure if Requisite was running his Skaven even more, this looks something that deck from Adepticon would really love to have the ability to,
Yeah.
potentially pop off three glory on this.
That'd be
Um,
very interesting.
yeah. So there's that. Gifts of the Gods is it's a hybrid one, and it is obviously, as you might be able to tell from the name, restricted to chaos warbands.
Mm-hmm.
And this is it's only one glory, but it is a hold two, so it might factor into some of those passive dread pageant builds that are. I'm going to try to hold two / hold more. And another thing is three or more friendly fighters each have one or more upgrades. So um, a secondary caveat. So not busted,
Yeah.
but there. And then Masters of the Abyss was let's see.
This is one for scoring in an end phase if 3 or more friendly fighters are in cover hexes.
Mm.
But after you score this, and this is for 2, after you score it, you well, you pick an opponent. So more often than not, you're one opponent then gets to choose to deal 1 damage to one fighter from your warband that is in a cover hex.
Mm.
So really simple to score because it's just cover hexes, and it's for 2, but you guaranteed are going to take a damage for scoring this.
Yeah, and we bring up simple to score, not because you say, well, I'm standing on 3 feature tokens. Like, why am I not just taking supremacy? Well, all of a sudden, standing on that double-sided gloom is valid here. So there's more landing spots for this.
Yeah, up to 7.
Yeah,
and then maybe even more because the ones that are printed on boards also count as cover, or are they just
they count as cover, but they're not a feature token. So
okay, yeah, but this specifically says are in cover hex.
Oops. Yep. All right. There you go.
So like
So it
even
counts.
printed pieces.
If you have darkening stone, you'll
Yeah.
count it too. So
So I don't know. If you're okay with losing that one life, that seems like a nice way to pick up two. And
yeah.
there's plenty of warbands right now that like to hide in cover. So
And this is not the first one of these we've seen. We've seen Lurking Death, which is a death only objective, which is
mm-hmm.
have one in enemy and have one in friendly, and or have two, but have at least one in enemy, and then your opponent can choose to damage somebody. That's pretty cool too.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think about that where obviously if you tried to score two of these at once, then your opponent gets to kill somebody right off the bat. Grimwatch maybe doesn't care. Like maybe they're like, okay, sure, kill one of my 2 health fighters. Now I'll get to
Yeah.
ghoul call them back. Like you get a glory, but I scored 4 and I'm going to bring this person back for free. And maybe
Yeah.
you can find a way to synergize it with some of like the vulnerable things, like a vulnerable fighter with a bunch of upgrades. I don't know. Like there's
There's
room to
definitely
explore.
there's some play there. And I mean, immediately when I was just thinking about it right now, it's like, well, any warband that can revive fighters doesn't really care about taking the 1 damage as long as the targets are all your fighters that can be revived.
Mm,
So even like Skaven probably don't care because they're like, oh, my hungering Skaven takes 1 damage. Oh no.
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's it's inconsequential. Like they were, if they got hit by pretty much anything, they were dead anyway. So
Yeah.
um, it should be interesting. I
Now,
do like that they're adding some like, so you can continue to make objectives harder and harder to score, or you can continue to have easier to score objectives that then have some other downside. And I like
yeah,
that they're starting to explore that.
yeah, it's a cool experiment. Now, I'll say the only way this could backfire, where you say like, well, this guy was going to get one shot anyway, is if I don't know there was ping in the game, ping
Oh
damage.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, there might be some of that, but they wouldn't add a lot of ping back into the game, would they?
or would they? I tried finding, and this is don't consider this a conclusive list, but this is just within these 2 sets. I found suffocating mists, tainted waters, creaking ceiling, barging forward, Abyssos eruption, spiteful channeling, cursed shadows, shadow coil, as all cards that did some nature of ping, and that is only looking at the Universal and Grand Alliance cards. There are those that
Yeah.
are within particular factions, like the Shadeborn have one and the Exiled Dead have one. That is potentially a sea change.
Yeah.
Um,
I always liked ping. I never used a lot of it. Just I think because of the warbands I was playing.
yeah,
But I like having a little bit of damage get put out rather than having 1-shot kills for every single attack in the game.
mm-hmm.
Because it gives you that opportunity to play around damage more.
Yeah,
Vulnerable becomes a state that's maybe just
real
incidental
scary.
to the game.
Oh,
Like
sure, yeah, yeah,
it just happens more, but it's also really scary because you're like, man, if they're just holding a ping card, I could just be dead.
yeah,
But a lot of the time right now, vulnerable just never comes up because it's like, well, I hit you for 5 and you're dead. And
yeah,
it's like, okay, seems fine.
yeah,
So the fact that they keep printing vulnerable means that they're probably wanting to support that state more. And I think ping makes that happen. Like
yeah,
any 2-wound fighter, they're just like, well, I'll put a damage on them just to set something else up.
yeah.
Oh, okay, now they're vulnerable.
Here's something that I think is worth considering about ping damage now as well is that and not that people take a ton of healing, but in previous seasons where you would be the first one to go after your power step, and by previous I mean stuff predating Harrow Deep. Now, if I take an action and I successfully land a hit and I make somebody vulnerable, in prior to Harrow Deep, you could say, well, I got a ping damage. I'm just going to finish this person off right now. now, whether you have healing or a lot of these pings are positional, right? Like they only
Hmm.
get you if you're in a shadow. So there's a chance for the person who's going to get pinged to respond. And I love that. So you can
Yeah.
say like, "Uh-oh, I'm vulnerable. I'm going to heal." Or, "Oh crap, I am vulnerable and I'm in a cover hex. I'm worried about one of the pings that gets me there. I'm going to step out of it with a sidestep or whatever the case may be." And so the fact that there is counterplay, however limited and how it may or may not be, I think that's good for the game.
Hmm.
And I like that. Like I think ping damage when there's not a chance to respond after a an activation was maybe
Yeah. It was basically like a twist the knife, no matter
yeah,
what the card was, right? It
right,
was
right,
like,
right, totally.
we're going to
So
increase the damage of this attack by one,
yeah,
effectively.
yeah,
So I also like that, and I think having healing in the game is more relevant when you have ping damage. So I like that too.
hmm,
One thing that's still confused, and it's entirely separate from this, but it's something that I've seen on more cards recently of like having, heal 2 or something. So say you got your fighter pinged, but you had a card that was heal 2. You can't use the heal 2 effect to heal 1 wound counter, can you?
oh man, you actually can. So I think in the latest FAQ,
Oh, it's in
uh,
the FAQ.
you
Okay.
have to be able to heal, but you don't have to be able to heal every one of those.
Man, there
Um,
there you go. The FAQ that I can never keep straight in my head. I will have
yeah,
to pull that back up again. Actually, I bet I can just pull it up right now very quickly. Oh,
and it,
yeah.
gosh, it might even be in the rule book. Like if you can't heal all of it, then just heal whatever is remaining. But I think the break point is if you can't heal, you can't play it. But as long as you can heal
Right.
some, you can play it.
So thinking about the ping damage and having additional, ways to deal damage outside of attacks, Creaking Ceiling is this really, really interesting new card. Um, Now, of course, I'm probably not going to have it right in front of me here because, of course, why wouldn't I? I don't want to get the wording wrong on this because it's fairly uh, important. So this is a domain. So, like many of the other domains, or all of the other domains, I guess, they persist until the end of the round. But if another domain is played, it will cancel the original one out. And for this one, each time a fighter is driven back into an edge hex or hex adjacent to a blocked hex, you deal 1 damage to that fighter. So the normal scenario for this will be that you play this, hit somebody, drive them back into a wall, and they take a damage. Great.
Hmm.
That's cool. I like that. It's thematic. And it's a nice way to just add some additional damage. The flip side, and something that we've talked about a little bit with knockback, um, is that it says each time a fighter is driven back into an edge hex or a hex adjacent to a blocked hex. So if you have a fighter with knockback and this is in play, and you drive somebody back through, say, 3 hexes that are all adjacent to a blocked hex, that fighter's taking 3 separate instances of 1 damage.
Yeah,
Uh, that's pretty nutty.
yeah. There's some
Um,
crazy plays that can happen with this, huh?
yeah, there,
Yeah.
like, I don't even want to think about the Snark deck that is like, hey, I'm
Well,
playing with a bunch of block hexes, and
but a snark is not a drive back; it's a push, right?
yes, so never mind. That would have been really scary. For some reason, I thought he drove you back, but no, you're
Yeah.
probably right. I think he just does a push, but like, I don't know. I kind of like this world where it's like, hey, if you build around it, suddenly knockback is pretty important. Like, even if you
Mhm.
just got 1 damage, this is still useful. And if that meant that you had to drive somebody back 2 or 3 hexes to get the 1 damage, like, still worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Um, and if you can line this up to get 2 or 3 damage from your drive back, like
Yeah.
your knockback attack that only does 1 or 2 damage is suddenly super scary.
Yeah.
Admittedly, it's only 1 round of the game, so it, it's probably not like game changing or game breaking, but it's certainly something to watch out for. And it's a design space that I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a cool way of setting up ping, and it's also universal, so it's going both ways. So there's other considerations there. But
Mm-hmm.
this is a powerful enough effect that it can, depending on how popular this card is, it can affect board choices. Like, oh man,
Yeah.
less blocked hexes in my board, please, because I don't want to deal with the possibility of this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think those were our overall themes. The only other one, and there's almost too much to talk about here, and it's a continuing theme, so we're not going to break down these cards, but was the pros and cons for being in cover. There's a
Oh,
ton of
yeah.
things that penalize your opponent for being in cover, or give you an advantage for being in cover, and that's going to create this big push pull, which puts even more pressure on getting on feature hexes, which is I think it's overall been good for the game. Like, I like that everyone's fighting over those and competing for those, and it's got all kinds of cascading consequences of gameplay. But I think I personally like it quite a lot. So
Yeah,
um,
I agree. I think overall it's definitely a positive. I think it's moved the game into a healthier space. I do I do lament a little bit that it's now much harder to play around objectives, like purely.
mm,
But it's still not impossible by any means.
mhm.
And even warbands that need them very badly, like Starblood, you can still do it. It's not that hard. But certain cards, specifically from Dire Chasm, are almost unplayable now because the hexes don't start as objectives
Right,
anymore. So it's
right.
like move an objective. Well,
Yeah,
there's none on the board.
yeah.
But yeah, I think it's good. We'll see sort of what wins out. I do like that right now the balance between pros and cons seems to be pretty solid.
Hmm.
There's a lot of benefits and a lot of negatives.
Hmm.
And I think that was definitely something that was missing with the hunter quarry mechanic. I feel like they really wanted there to be this sort of push pull of like, oh man, it could be bad to be a quarry. And then it was just not. And it was like, well, yeah, of course I'm going to take quarry stuff. It's all positive. Like there's no downside at all. Um, so it'll be interesting to see if we end up with a skew towards the end of the season. But right now, it feels like there's not any threat of that, which is great because it really felt weird to end up being like it's better to be a quarry than a hunter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Any other sort of? I mean, I know we've got a lot of pros and cons, but if there's any other specific examples you think deserve some talking about, or if there's any just other like random cards that you think we should discuss before we wrap up today?
No, nothing specific. I just like that there's a lot of competition for them. I think there's going to be a lot of high level play, which will involve the timing of when do I flip. This person has flipped this at this time. Like, what does that mean? Is it a bluff? Does it mean this? Are they trying to block a thing that I have? I like that there's a potential for that, and I have not played enough to be able to look into that, to see how
Yeah,
that plays out yet. But I think there's a lot of possibilities there, and I'm excited for it.
definitely. I very much agree. All right. So that is a very quick rundown of some of the new universals, some thoughts of what's going on here as a whole. Like we said before, if you're really, we're hoping for a more in-depth coverage and you want like specific breakdowns of each individual card, you can go find that in lots of other places. Lots of friends out there in the content creator universe have all of that stuff available for you. And so if that's what you need, go find those. Um, if you have some thoughts about any of these themes that we talked about, or if you think that there are any themes that we missed and you think we should be aware of, let us know. You can reach us at WTHcast on Twitter or whatthehexcast at gmail.com. if you are interested in any other just topics in the greater Age of Sigmar universe, you can head on over to themortalrealms.com. All of our other podcasts have all their content posted there, and you can check out all sorts of different things, from Age of Sigmar stories to Warcry to Path to Glory. Anything Age of Sigmar that's that you're interested in, you can find it there. Coming up next, I think we are probably leaning towards trying to do something with the Exiled Dead. I think maybe a bat rep. There's some scheduling, problems with trying to do bat reps. So we know we want to do that, but whether that exactly comes next or soon is yet to be determined. But we also have like a number of these sort of cards we didn't really know. It's sort of like, hey, this seems like a weird outlier. Like this seems like almost like a one-off design choice. That seems interesting. And I know, Davey, you had some thoughts about just that as a general topic. Anything you want to let listeners know about?
Yeah, I think it would be a really fun topic to cover. Like, what are some weird outlier cards? And in this, I'm even thinking like almost the prototype for this is Confusion, which is not that weird a card, but it's a card that doesn't get included in a lot of decks, but it's like in the right deck, in the right situation, it is really powerful. And I felt like going through the new universals, there were a number of cards that fit that. And so I think we're going to come up with a list of that. I'd love, if you are listening, send us in what you think is a weird outlier card that you think is actually like if you want to say underrated or overlooked, send me your weird overlooked outlier cards. You can hit us at the contacts we mentioned, our Twitter or email, and say why you think it's fitting this category, and we'll include your discussion in our episode. We're turning some episodes kind of fast to trying to cover all the deluge of content, so we'll give it a few weeks to kind of collect up some of that information. But hit us with your stuff.
Yeah, and I suppose, well, I didn't mention it before. If you want to just more directly talk with us, or more informally, I suppose, as well, you can feel free to join up in the Mortal Realms Discord. We have a sub channel there specifically for Underworlds, and it's just a pretty good place to just hang out and talk games. So
yeah,
that is another avenue to reach us at. But that's just gonna do it for this episode. You got a recommended listening for folks today?
So I have two things for you. One I haven't put in here. It's our new segment where it's the digging Harrow deeply into the lore.
Yes.
All right. So Phil, I'm coming at you with a quote. A listener, play along at home. I have a quote from this: "Every fighter will meet their match in Harrow Deep at some point."
Equal contest?
You're saying the right words, just in the wrong order.
Contest of equals.
You got there. Nice
I always
work.
get those.
Right. Yeah.
I get those backwards because
there's unequal contest and Yeah, I like that one because it was thematic, but you could conclude where it was. Well done. Hope you got it too, listener. Your recommended listening for this episode is "The Room It Was." It's by Cloud Nothings, and it's from The Shadow I Remember. In a salute to all the shadows down here in the Nether Maze.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. For What the Hex, I've been Phil.
And I've been Davey. Okay.
Well, that seems to be working. Yeah. I guess we'll just have to keep an eye on that.
I'm going to start.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Everything's fine.
Okay. Good. Still got to choose a warband.
Yeah. I just brought up my Reavers earlier today and did some test draws. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be rough. I actually thought about. I was like, is this the one where like just for funsies I bring Corn's Chosen or Chosen to Corn or whatever
Ooh,
the ridiculous one
yes.
is? I was like, I kind of really want to. And I was like, man, it might be a case where like the only person I scored against is like somebody who's really new. And they're like, oh yeah, like we fought so close, but I'm way in the lead. And I'll be like, yeah, but I have Arnulf alive. So I'll get
You
6
know,
more glory.
don't worry.
Yeah.
Here to
Um,
snatch your dreams. I was thinking the
yeah.
same thing with Magors, but
Mm,
playing the one for 8 that
yeah.
has just Magor.
So ridiculous. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so I may or may not include that in there. But
We're coming at you just a few days after the pre-release or the pre-orders went up for the new
can
3
I
release.
jump in for a sec? Do you want to do the intros?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
man.
All right. From the top.
From the top.